Hello, beautiful humans. This is Jaylene and Jules from the Empowering Women Project, and you're listening to the EWP podcast.
This podcast is for the women who know deep in their soul they are here for more. If you are done with the BS stories and limiting beliefs that are holding you back from your dreams becoming a reality,
come jump in the driver's seat and pave the way back home to her. This is a space for you to feel seen, heard, supported, and accepted for who you are, who you were, and who you're becoming.
Celebrating you wherever you are in your journey. Sit back, grab a tea or a wine, and come empower yourself with us. Jules and Day, let's grow. Hello and welcome back to the EWP.
Hello, beautiful humans.
We are welcomed today by a beautiful guest, Suzie Forbes. Suzie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Suzie, and I'm the founder of the Wonderful Society. Also a mama of two kids with really big emotions who are now young adults. I am also an occupational therapist and a mental health care practitioner by trade, and have had the privilege of working with families for over 30 years in the sort of pediatric space, from tiny little bubbas teaching infant massage all the way through to young adults and supporting them to get into the world of work. Yeah, so that's kind of my background. I'd love to tell the story of my kids, though, and some of my personal story as well. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm so excited to be here on EWP. I was a single mum raising two little kids with really big emotions not that long ago for myself. And I guess this is one of my proudest achievements of yet, is when I look at my young adults now and where we have come from and the challenges we have managed over the many, many years. I just am so proud, and so I feel so lucky that I found my way through, because it was pretty challenging. So I have a passionate and lion-hearted daughter. She was literally born that way, driven, focused, literally came out and she was like, where's that boob? I need some milk now. And she had head control. She had everything. She knew exactly where she was going. But she's always had this really high spirit and energy, and she would never take no for an answer. You could never confront her. You could never block where she was going. She was very
queen
and strong-willed from the tiniest little bean. So it's taken a lot of intentional parenting. I mean, she drove me crazy when she was little, and specific sort of strategies of survival for me as well. And when she was little, I just had this vision of her as a teenager setting fires and stealing cars, because she was so determined to do everything her way and anti the way anybody else on. Like, she was the anti-pink. She wouldn't wear pink. It was impossible to find clothes for her because she wanted to wear black as a 3-year-old. It was unbelievable. So, but now I can see, through the work I've done, through the strategies I've built, and I can actually see her, all that energy and passion is now being driven towards incredible leadership and sense of community. So she's right into ocean conservation. She swam with sharks just in January, tiger sharks. She's done some really amazing things, and she's sort of standing up to that. And then my other child is my clingy, sensitive, I call him highly perceptive sort of child, really bright also, but kind of sees the world in hypercolor, if you like, and takes on everybody's emotions around him as well. So gets really overwhelmed socially really easily. And for him, I've really walked a sword's edge for his entire life, and pushing enough so that he actually does things and builds confidence. And because if we don't do things, if we hide and escape, we don't ever build confidence in our own skills. But also making sure that he has space and time to back off and make sure his stress levels stay out of sort of that toxic zone. And I've lost so much sleep over him as well, over his whole lifespan. So when they were little, you know, like 4 and 6, I kind of had this vision of this one that was going to be a fire starter and this vision of this other one that was going to continue to be Velcro to my leg for the rest of my life until I was a very old lady. So it hasn't turned out that way. So it's pretty good at this point. So I can actually remember a time when they were that little, sort of 4 and 7, 3 and 6-ish sort of age. And, you know, I was a single mum and I was really overwhelmed. I was running a business. I was in private practice as an OT. I had people working for me. I was seen as an expert, but I actually didn't feel like I was enough because my kids' big emotions and the daily battles we were in all day, every day were just so overwhelming for me. And I remember actually crying and like hiding myself in the bedroom and crying and thinking, I can't do this. This is awful. Like I'm supposed to be this expert in in kids in development.
Yeah.
And I'm seriously not coping. This is not okay. And, you know, I really wanted connection for them both. That was really important for me because of what I knew about development. But I was just finding it impossible to create while I had to also keep them safe. And I was so overwhelmed, you know, with guilt and worry and basically not feeling enough.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
I just want to say I see you so much. Like there is going to be so many mamas that listen to this like podcast, but well, the transition from the littlies to the teenagers is exactly what I'm in right now, and I can just totally relate. I know where you were at, and I'm just like I was literally crying in a therapy session yesterday over this transitional period of like, yeah, they're having to step aside and be the guide more than, you know, being in full control with the children. So freaking see you, mama. Like you're amazing, and the fact that you're on the other side and you, like your biggest accomplishment is your children, it just gives me hope, but also be giving lots of mamas hope out there as well. So yeah, I just got full body goosebumps all the time that you're talking, honestly. Like just
And it's so true. Like I think we can all, when you're in the trenches, it's really hard to see the way out, if you know what I mean. And that's, I think for me, the biggest driver of the work I do is that I want to help mamas out of that trench. And also I know through my work that our kids, our teens and our kids are actually in crisis in terms of their mental health. And it's been getting worse and worse. So Australia's the leading cause of death in 15 to 25-year-olds in Australia remains suicide. Depression and anxiety have continued to increase since 2014. They've continued to increase in kids age 4 to 18. We now have almost 1 in 4 kids with some sort of mental health diagnoses. And yes, that includes things like autism and ADHD and those sorts of things, but it also includes depression, anxiety, bipolar sort of stuff. And so what we know about that is that there are things we can do. There's a lot of preventative things that we can do as parents, as mums, to, and I call it, my system is called the Stormproofing Your Kids system, because there's actually evidence-based strategies we can use to set our kids up for better success. So even if overwhelming sadness comes or some big life events happen, I call them storms, you know, they're going to come. Kids are going to get that, especially in that transition from tweens to teens. You're going to get storms. There's going to be stormy times. But if we've actually set them up with some strategies and skills that we know not only work from the evidence base, but are actually sustainable for families. And that's what I found is because I've worked with families for over 30 years, you know, all the stuff that I work with, I have applied to my own kids, but I've also applied to many, like I've worked with thousands of families. So I've applied it with lots of parents. And so I know what works and I know what people can do, because sometimes, you know, there'll be a theory that comes through the psychological research or through neuroscience. And it's like, yeah, but mate, I could never do that all day, every day. That's not realistic for a parent, you know, functioning in a busy
Yeah.
world, working, doing this, doing that, and all those sorts of things. So it's really cool to know what's sustainable as well and
Yeah.
what we can do.
Could you share a couple of like little strategies that you use with families that could help people that are navigating some big emotions with their children, especially tweens, I guess, all kids, but yeah.
Coming back to what you were saying, Daleen, about that transition from tweens into teens as well. So one of the things I've often talked to families about is this idea that when our kids are little, we kind of walk ahead of them, or we scoop them up and carry them, right? So we're kind of like, come on, let's go. We're going along, and they need to stop and smell every flower and, pick up every stick and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So we kind of have I have this analogy of us walking ahead of them, sort of bringing them along, or we scoop them up and we bring them along.
Yeah.
As they hit sort of the second half of primary school, probably from about 8 or 9 through to their tweens, so it's probably 12, those tween years, you're doing very much more that walking beside them. So there's kind of this, you're there with them, you're parallel with them, you're giving them a little bit of independence, but you're still guiding that pretty strongly as you go, yeah? And then they kind of get to that 13, 14, and what you actually have to do is step behind them. And you don't want to be too far behind, because if you get too far behind, because what actually happens developmentally at that age is their brains are pruning and they're developing, they're building their adult brain. So you want that adult brain to be built in a positive way, right? So you still need to guide that. The analogy I use for that is, cleaning out the wardrobe or the pantry. Like if you think about your kid's wardrobe at 12, and you let them clean out all the little kid clothes, it's going to make a big fat mess before they can put their big kid clothes in to the wardrobe.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to then sort of in our minds walk 1 or 2 steps behind them rather than right next to them or in front of them and try and steer them, because what I see often is parents who try and stay in front or try and stay next to them, you get a lot more conflict. And you're going to get conflict. That's actually normal, because the developmental job of a 14-year-old is to say, hey, I'm trying to create my own identity.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's actually, and it's really hard as a parent to start
politely. Yeah.
It is. No, I 100%. I went through it. I know exactly. Especially with your oldest, it's really hard to step back. Once you've done it once, it kind of gets a bit easier because you get tighter.
Yeah, literally. And then when you were saying about the younger, and that's what you're in, is like the curiosity and the wonder and all that. Julia and I talked about this yesterday, and it's so beautiful, both stages. But yeah, they're both challenging in different ways. Like toddy stage and teen, it's just completely different. And I think it's the having to let go of the control a little bit. And I find that really hard. And I think it is because it's my first son and I don't know what to do, I guess. And yeah, just navigating that. But yeah, it's a beautiful journey. It's really beautiful, but confusing.
Yeah. And a lot of what happens at sort of 12 to 15 mirrors what happens at 2 to 5 for our kids. So, so there is, and it's not too late, Daleen, but, there's a real opportunity for people like Jules who have got younger kids to really set up and, train their kids at the younger age for what's going to happen at teenage. And I can tell you a little story about my daughter with this. So when she was even really tiny, my daughter realized that she could only get one-to-one time with me in the middle of the night. I think she worked out, life was so busy and running around after the older child, and I'm working and doing all sorts of stuff. She's off to daycare and all that sort of stuff. So she worked out that she needed to get one-to-one mama time in the middle of the night. And she started this little process at bedtime where when I would actually, we'd do all that bedtime routine, and she would then start to list her grievances. So it would be, this kid knocked this block tower over that I built, or that kid hit that kid, or somebody wouldn't play my game with my rules the way I wanted them done. And they were really tiny little things, and they really annoyed me because I had worked all day, picked my kids up, done all the kids' stuff, fed them, done the bedtime routine, and I was running a private practice. I had paperwork I needed to do. I just wanted her to go to sleep so I could actually go and finish my work day. because often I wasn't falling into bed till 11 or 12, and it wasn't that I'd had time for myself. I'd actually just needed to finish my workday. So I was getting really, really frustrated. But the more I pushed back at her, the more escalated she would become and animated about, you must listen to me because this is really important to me. And so I needed to take a step back, and I thought, as an OT and as a parent coach, what would you sort of say to a parent who presented with this sort of thing? And really, it came back to the values-based parenting system that I still teach now. And one of the values that I had identified for my family, for my kids, my 2 kids and I, as a single parent family, was connection. And I realized that by negating her need to tell me her grievances of the day, which felt really tiny and trivial and silly to me, I was not building that connection for her. She just wanted to be heard, seen, and she wanted me to feel her pain. She didn't want me to actually solve the problem. So it didn't actually add another item that I had to tick off, which actually relieved me. I actually went, oh, this isn't something I need to fix, because, I had so many things that I needed to fix, juggling that mental load that we do as mums. And then it kind of really shifted it for me. And then the other part of that begin with the end in mind idea was that the short-term goal was just to get her to sleep, right? And I learnt very quickly that if I made space and I listened to her with empathy and I helped her feel her pain and I said, oh, that sounds crap. That sounds awful. Oh, that's so bad. Like, if I really had that empathy with her, she would de-escalate very quickly, and then she would calm and she would go to sleep faster. So by actually taking that step back, instead of fighting with her and thinking about what not only my long-term goal was, which was connection, but my short-term goal, which was that I wanted her to go to sleep, I actually got my way better. And then the beauty of that, because we did that while she was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it reduced in frequency and intensity over time, is that now she just turned 17, but now, still at 9 o'clock at night is when she tells me if something fairly significant's gone on and she needs me just to hold space for her. This is now our pattern. But I've trained her to do that. So I know, at 15, 16 and 17, I know what's going on. And let me tell you, as the parent of a teenager, you need to know what's going on if you want to be able to support them and just stay that, close distance to them, not too far back that you can't support them and help them catch it beforehand. So you've got to train them when they're little, if you can.
Yeah, for sure. But if you start anytime, it's better than not starting at all. That's from my experience. Like I've been 100%. In therapy. Yeah, I've been in therapy for like 8 months, and the changes that I've seen just within our family dynamic, I was crying to Julie yesterday going, it's so beautiful. Like it goes to show like the mom needs to work on obviously regulating her nervous system, and then in turn it just affects the whole entire household. Like it just calms it down. Like I was so like hyper vigilant all the time, and things happen in our life now and we're just like ebbing and flowing through everything. We've got the tools now and I'm able to teach my kids, and I think that's so beautiful. And Jules is on the same journey, but she's doing it from such a young age, and like Heidi's just going to be the most emotionally intelligent little human with what she does with her parenting. So we'll pass it over to Jules so you can talk a bit more into what you do, honey.
Yeah, thank you. So it's just really about calming my own nervous system. And it's so interesting. He'll know from the second he opens his eyes if I'm a little bit off. He'll know straight away. He's like, oh, mommy's off. So he's off. He just really feels what I feel. It's like he's a part of me, and they are really, but he just, operates on how mommy's feeling, how mommy's operating. And it's really pivotal for us to just look at our own toolkit and calm our central nervous system to be able to then teach them and let them see, we have emotions too, but this is how mommy does it. And it's so interesting when I do come out and change my energy, how I see his energy change as well. Like he just kind of ebbs and flows with me. And the biggest thing I find for us is connection as well. And I'm definitely, I've been thinking about implementing those values and determining, you think it's 3, Suzie, that you should have?
Yeah, so in my process, we come down to 3. I find
Mm.
if you have more than that, it's really hard to just anchor them as you need them to use them functionally throughout your day. Because if you've got, some people can do 5, but I've found most families have more success if they have 3 core values that they use to access over their day and help support them make those decisions. I think,
Yeah,
Jules,
I'm
one of
gonna
the
do
things that
that.
yeah. And one of the things that
Mm.
you just said, which I think is really, really important, and it's something I talk about a lot, is I call that co-regulation. So when we bring calm to the chaos of the child, whether the child is 2 or 12, um, we actually help them de-escalate if something's going on for them. And so you're right, the power of you as a parent to be able to rise above the emotion and have your own set of self-care strategies that help you maintain that is really essential to intentional parenting. So kind of what I was talking about before was that intentional piece of that values piece, that what do I imagine for my child as they grow older, and I talk about growing happy, healthy, helpful humans. And then this other piece, which is around the fact that our kids have an almost magical ability to push our buttons and trigger any open pains that we have. They seem to inherently know how to do that and to fly. Taylane's like nodding her head. Going,
I'm like, are they? Do they get given a book at birth? Like these are mum's buttons.
I know, it's interesting. So I often, that's overwhelming for a lot of parents. And really, I see that as an opportunity for us to grow and for them to highlight. And actually, they're kind of giving us that opportunity to heal. So often those triggers come from our own childhoods, right? But our kids are actually saying, hey, heal, mama, for me. And you'll heal as well, and you'll feel better about this as well. So when I go to my not enoughness, that was my very big pattern. I was told I was not enough in a lot of ways, and I never felt like I was enough. And it is the pattern I go to when I'm stressed, but I learnt to manage that and to shift that thinking and to go, no, love, you're more than enough. But my kids gave me that opportunity, if that makes sense. And by doing that work, I really reduced the really big emotions that my kids were showing as well. They're still there. Those temperaments are still there. But it definitely helps when I know how to rise above them for them to come with. It really,
How
really helps them
magic.
to identify. Pardon?
It's so magical. Like Jules and I always say, we're like, we should start like having people having access to our voice clips, because the epiphanies that we get all the time are like, we just wish other mums could feel what we feel, like going from very dysregulated humans from all of our trauma and stuff to regulating and seeing the epiphanies that we have, and like the realizations and just the tools and how we're able to ebb and flow through everything. It just really, it really is about the parents regulating themselves so they can co-regulate with our kids.
And that's right. And so a large amount of it is around the work we do as well. And that's part of why I'm so passionate about working with parents and mums in particular, is because for years I was the therapist working with the child. Yeah. And I was sort of supporting and coaching the mum on the side, or there's sometimes the dad, but often it was the mum on the side. And I always felt like if I could spend more time with mum, what I could do, it's like that, the analogy of, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but teach him to fish, feed himself and feed the village, really. So for me, I can give strategies. So for example, if a child has some really strong sensory issues and you need to actually, put some really specific strategies in place for that child. Like my son was very sensitive to sound and touch. He didn't like messy touch. And if we went into a noisy place, his behavior would become really dysregulated. So we actually didn't attend a birthday party unless it was outside until he was about 10 years old, because he would have a meltdown and then I could not bring him back until his next sleep, basically.
I remember you saying something about school refusal with your son as well. Did you have that? Yeah, that's a real thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, 13 years of it, the whole school.
Wow.
Well, we
In
got
primary
through and he's
school?
at uni now.
Primary
whole way
school
through.
is, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
His very first day of prep, he was trying to climb. He was a tall kid and he was trying to climb out the gate. He actually opened the gate a couple of times. They had to really watch him because he would climb up on the gate and pull the thing and swing out and jump
Yeah.
off. No, first day of prep, I was like, right, so movement's regulating for him, right? So I'm like, all right, we're going to scooter to school. So I walked with the baby in the pram and him scootering. He's going to scooter to school. That rhythmic action's going to, keep him calm. And he scooted to school and he scooted in the gate and he had a look and he turned around. He said, no, thank you, mama. And he kept going back out. And that was it. It was just like school refusal from then on. So,
oh, wow.
yeah, battles, 2 and 3 hour battles in the mornings and stuff for a long time. We built a lot of strategies over time and it got a lot easier. But yeah, it was pretty full on for a long time. Yeah.
Wow.
And
So
you
Suzie,
needed to
you talk so much. Oh, sorry. I was going to say you talk so much about how you help other people, how you help your children, how you help other parents, how you are always helping everyone. How do you empower yourself? What do you do to empower Suzie?
So I love yoga and I love yin yoga particularly, and restore sort of yoga. I find it keeps me regulated enough. I did a lot of meditation and breath work when my kids were little. So the coach I worked with, so when I got to that really low point with the tears in the bedroom and all of that sort of stuff, that was the point at which I decided I needed to ask for help. And I actually enlisted a coach, and she is a counselor and a life coach, and she helped me identify my values really clearly, which lightened my load massively. But she's also a meditation teacher. She has her own podcast as well now, so with lots of meditations, beautiful meditations. So yeah, I did a lot of that work, and I think the yoga and the meditation really helped me. I also like to play the piano and I do craft and art sort of stuff as well. And most school holidays, you'll find me doing all of those things in mass. But from week to week, it's the yoga and walking the dogs and stuff like that keeps me on the level.
You sound creative.
Yeah, and I've managed to raise 2 very good storytellers. So, and I think it's exposure. I mean, I actually worked out once that before Kai started school, I had read them 10,000 books.
Holy, we need to get the books going a bit more over here. Wow.
Little picture books most of the time. Like that was not, we hadn't hit Harry Potter yet, but like little picture books. Like it was, I just was like, whoa, this is, because it was something, it sat with that value of connection and that belonging. And we would, and Kai didn't sit still very much. So, but he loved a story. So he would sit or climb on me or dance or whatever, but he would stay for a story. Whereas often I couldn't get him to sit and stay with me, other than at meal times and for a story. So
Hudson loves reading, but it'll be the same 3 books on rotation every single night for about 30 days. And then he'll swap out one of them. But yeah, we just end up reading the same ones, which is fine because that's what he wants to read. And I let him choose them. But we've maybe read the same book 10,000 times.
That's highly regulating for kids, by the way. So being able to have that predictable story come in. So I used to have a rule. We'd go to the library and the kids could have 10 books each. And I had a rule that only 3 of them could be ones that they'd already borrowed. So we would have at least a third of them that was still familiar and moving through. And then we would have, the other 2/3 that were new books that they were choosing. And that worked really well for my kids. But yeah, that familiar, it's actually like us. I don't know about you, in COVID, we all went back and there was probably a series that you watched during COVID that was a familiar series that you'd watched years ago. So for me, it was Friends. I went back to Friends and was watching Friends. And one of the things is it made us all feel more connected, but it also made us feel safer and calmer because it was from a time where we felt more in control as well.
Mm.
And so with kids, stories or videos that they love, you know, maybe it's a Bluey episode, or maybe it's a, you know, a poo video, or a, you know, story or whatever, you know, it makes them feel comfortable and safe because they know what's going to happen. So it's actually a really good regulating. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I love that. I love you're so full of knowledge, and I just feel like a little sponge just sitting here in awe, absorbing it all. And a lot of the things that you spoke of really align with what Daleen and I talk about in all of the episodes on EWP. So those belief systems that we had growing up, and values and connection and all of that. So yeah, it's just really lovely to have these chats with you today.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
And one of the other things I talk to families a lot about is routines and rhythms that we can rest in. Because I was never very structured. You know, when I had a baby and everyone said, oh, you need to get them on a I was like, nah, baby needs to feed, I'll feed baby. Baby needs to sleep, I'll swaddle them up and I'll, you know, snuggle them until they sleep, and then they'll go to sleep, sort of thing. But over the years, you know, and working with lots and lots of families, having some rhythms about the day basically means we can put down some of that cognitive load, because we don't need to plan for it. We just know it's going to happen. We just need to initiate it. And also having routines for things like solving problems as they come up can be really, really helpful, because as we teach our kids the tools for that sort of process, and it feels really familiar, like the 3 preferred books, they don't become as dysregulated as we ask them to do it. So I actually we have a problem solve strategy that I teach a lot. And I've got a little book that goes with that. So I'm happy to give you the link for that book as well to pop into the show notes. But it's a really lovely routine. Takes a bit to teach your kids at the beginning, but it can actually, once they learn it, it's so empowering, because like for my kids, I worked this out when they were probably 4 and 7, but by the time they were 8 and 11, I'd just pull out the blue folder that had the We Had a Problem strategy notes in it, and they'd just start brainstorming and solve the problem by themselves, and then come to me and go, Mum, the solution is, and they'd give me the solution. And I could hear them start to do it with their mates. So, you know, there'd be a conversation about something and they'd be like, hey, what about this? Or what about that? And then you'd say, and then you could see them actually assessing the strategies, you know, the way they were problem solving, and then coming up with the best one, but in consultation with everybody, not just taking over, you know, actually knowing that consultative sort of, we collaborate to solve a problem together. It's really powerful and really cool.
Amen. Solutions over problems.
And collaboration over competition, right? So we as a family work together to solve this issue that we have. It's not you're bad, and so you need to fix it. It's we have a problem. You don't seem to be able to get your socks and shoes on every single time we go out the door, which means I am 20 minutes late every single time. This is a problem we have as a family. How are we going to solve this?
The system in place.
Yeah. And the kids actually came up with, we take our socks and shoes out the door with us and we put them on in the car. And I'm like, well, if it works and they're on by the time we get to wherever we need to go for it. And can I tell you, at 17 and 20, they're still doing that.
I couldn't deal. You don't feel put together when you don't have your shoes on running out the door. How cute though. Imagine if they took like odd shoes out the door and they're going into work.
I know. Well, it had to stop when they do driving lessons with me. I'm like, no, you need your shoes on to do driving lessons. But otherwise, they still do it. Like if we're headed out the door to an appointment, or we're going to see family, or I'm dropping them at friends or whatever, you know, they're like, oh yeah, all right. And they run out the door with their socks and shoes still in there.
That's so cute. So
I know I'll be downloading that ebook for sure.
Amen. We already have like binge watched some of your stuff on your Facebook page. It's beautiful. I use that analogy of like thinking like I forgot it exactly. Do you want to talk into it, how it was like not short focused on what's happening now, but the long goal?
So I think this relates back to what we were referring to a little bit before, which is that as parents, whenever there's sort of an issue arising, you have the opportunity to think about what the short-term goal is for that moment in time, but also what the longer-term goal is for you. So, I do talk a lot about helping people grow happy, healthy, helpful humans. And that longer term picture of, I now have my 20-year-old and I know what he looks like and I know the values he embodies at this point. But when he was 4 and 5, imagining that person walking through the door was really, really hard. But being able to think about who I would like to walk through the door is one of the exercises I do with families very early on, usually, so that they can kind of get not because you want to have a false picture of, I'm going to force this on my child, but that actually tells you a lot about what you value as a parent. Because if you are going to say, well, I'd like my child when they're 20 to walk in and be able to talk about the close group of friends that they have, then that connection and that ability to build community and have good social networks is a really important value for you. Whether that happens or not, is a different thing, but being able to actually identify that and isolate that and have something that guides you as you go through. So an example I give a lot of the time around this connection as well is not just the story about my daughter and her grievance process in the evenings, but was around the use of technology. So, my kids were really in that very first run of kids that had iPhones in their hands from really little. I actually remember I got an iPhone 2, I think, and I remember my daughter was only a baby and she could use it. And my ex-husband couldn't actually use it. It was quite funny. He's like, how do I make a call on this thing? And she's like, hit the phone button, the green button, because she knew exactly what she was doing. But, it's quite different. It was brand new parenting in a lot of ways. And a lot of my friends, what they did is they were very restrictive about what their kids could and couldn't do, and it meant they actually had to be policemen all the time. They were on top of it all the time. Now, I had some parental controls. My kids had restricted time that they were allowed to do passive things on the internet. Like they were actually only allowed to watch half an hour of YouTube each when they were in primary school. But what that actually did is it kind of created the TV problem. So when we were little and we had one TV in the family, which is how I started with my kids, it meant you actually had to negotiate to work out who wanted to watch what, right? Now everybody's got a device and they're in a separate room. That doesn't create community and those skills. So by doing that, it actually meant that my kids would actually work together and they'd go, oh, we both want to watch this video, so that'll only count for 20 minutes. That's 10 minutes each. And then we get 20 minutes. And they'd actually negotiate and use these problem-solving skills to build a better world for themselves, if you know what I mean. Like, I didn't care. They had their 30 minutes each. Yeah. But the other part of that was we had a very clear rule that connection came first. And so if a human was talking to you, you needed to be aware of it. So my kids would walk around with one headphone on so that if I said, hey, they were like, oh, mum needs my attention. And they knew that because if they didn't respond in some way, the device would be taken away for a period of time. Now, I was always very mindful of the fact that if I was doing work and I was in the middle of an email and my kid said, hey, mama, and I was like, I just need a minute to finish this email and I'll be with you, that I also needed to give them that respect as well. So if my son was in the middle of a game with a friend, Minecraft building or whatever, and I said, hey, and he said, give me a minute, I just need to finish this thing with my friend and I'll be there in a minute, I would grant that, but the connection came first. And then I was actually able to teach from that values base and say, hey, we're a connected family. And when I say I need to chat to you, we need to be able to chat to each other. And that's the reason I'm asking you to now leave that game versus get off the game because I tell you so, which can work when they're little, but it will not work with a teenager. Yeah. There were days where the Wi-Fi came shopping with me, like I unplugged it from the wall and it left with me when they were old.
Oh my
because it was
God.
like, you've got to get off. It's too much. But I very much parented from the point of view of, if you're creating things online, and what I did by doing that is I've actually developed work skills. You know, my son's been an online editor for YouTubers since he was 15,
Wow.
because he was creating iMovies when he was 10. So I said, no, none of this passive, just sit there and do that. You have to create things. So they were in GarageBand and they were in iMovie and they were doing all that sort of stuff on iPads from when they were really little. And, you know, that's created work skills as he's gotten older.
Yeah.
And now that's what he's actually doing at uni, is studying filmmaking. So, you know, that kind of created part of that storytelling component as well.
That's
So
beautiful.
using for purpose and using for values-based and being intentional about what your end goal is, whether it's that long-term, I want a kid who walks in at 20 and he's got this gorgeous group of friends, which we do have. Versus the kid that could have easily locked himself in the bedroom at 12 and never come out again.
Amen. Yeah, with all the things that you navigated with like school refusal and all the rest of it, yeah, it could have completely went the other way. So that's a kudos to you, Mama.
And the systems that were created through that, you know, like and that getting that balance between, you know, so it's not about being so free and easy that there's no discipline. You have to have lines in place. Kids feel safe with some lines, right? There has to be boundaries in place.
Yeah.
But this mutual respect of, I hear your voice, tell me what you're thinking, you help me problem solve this. And building those skills, I call them executive functioning skills because I'm a therapist, yeah. So those executive functioning skills of, I can be regulated in this social interaction, I can come up with creative solutions for a problem, I can sequence my actions, I can persist even when this problem's a bit tricky. I've got some basic time management and stress management skills as we move through this process. They're all executive functioning skills, and we need to teach them to kids. And actually, that's a large part of what I do as well, because the research shows us very clearly kids with poor executive functioning skills have much higher incidence and intensity of mental health issues.
Yeah,
because they end up socially isolated. They move away from the problem rather than asking for help. They don't have the ability to actually solve the issue, so they get overwhelmed by it too quickly, and that they become dysregulated really quickly. Dysregulated people tend to repel people rather than attract them to come and help them. And so they end up feeling really alone, really left out, and not have the self-efficacy that kids who are able to persist through tricky things actually have build over time. Yeah.
I love that you've navigated all of this in your own life. So you have that life experience to bring to parents that you're now supporting along their journeys. I just think that's so powerful and so beautiful.
It's such a privilege, really, right? So, you know, I've thought that all the way through my career as an OT, that it's such a privilege that people let me into their families and I can walk alongside of them for a certain period of time and then come out, and the wisdom that they've taught me over the years as well as my own direct lived experience. And yeah, you know, when I say to parents, yeah, I get it, it's overwhelming. I totally get it. There was plenty of times where I had my hand, you know, my head in my hands going, what am I doing? How do I do this? And how do I dust myself off and get back up again now? So, you know, I don't want people to do that alone. I want to have this community where people can support each other that are also raising kids with big emotions. Because the thing about kids with big emotions, kids that are more dysregulated, the general sort of guidebooks, your sort of general parenting ideas work okay to a certain extent, but often what actually happens is parents will actually go, well, I tried this and I tried that and I tried this and I tried that and I spent all this money doing that. But what actually happened was I failed. And so now again, that I'm not good enough, it didn't work for me, comes up. Whereas if you are actually in a community or you have support from people that also have kids with big emotions and this sort of dysregulation and difficulties with these executive functioning skills, it makes a huge difference, because these kids tend to melt down in the places where we want them to do it the least.
Mm.
Often
Yeah.
a public place, often when there's people around that
School.
you know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and that at people's homes and like in your home most of the time they're perfect, and other like just using my oldest son as an example, goes to school very dysregulated, doesn't like it, goes to work, he's up early in the morning, he's off to work, like gets himself ready and all the rest of it, and then when he's at other people's houses he's respectful as. So yeah, it's kind of like they have their environments where they're more dysregulated than other times, and it's really interesting to see the dynamics of where they're, I think you can kind of tell with where they're meant to be and the path they're meant to be on where they're more dysregulated, I guess. So, but I guess as younger kids, shopping centers are very overstimulating, even for parents, like for adults. So, yeah.
It all comes back to regulating your own emotions at the end of the day. Like it all comes back to yourself and you as a person, as a woman, as a mama. In order to help co-regulate, you need to know how to regulate yourself. And I feel like that's the missing link. I feel like a lot of people are missing that component. And if we could just empower them to find that within themselves, what are your tools? What are your strategies? How do you regulate yourself? Because if you're not regulated, it's really hard to help a little regulate.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
And that's so true. But I also think that kids with really big emotions or kids with differences in these executive functioning, which includes that regulation, even if mum is really calm, if they go into an overstimulating environment like a big Westfield shopping centre or even the supermarket, like to this day, like I actually, wherever I could avoid taking my son to the supermarket, I did, because it just made life so difficult. When he was tiny, I could regulate him by giving him an apple or something like that, and he'd be munching, and the crunching would help him regulate, and we'd get through if it was only a short shop. But if I had to do my full week shop, I couldn't do it with him in tow because he would be melted down by the end of it, even if I was calm. So sometimes this is where I'm talking about, sometimes that sort of the co-regulation helps to an extent for these kids, but if they've got these difficulties, you actually almost have to prime them. So, for example, if I did want to take him to the shop, or I needed to take him to the shop, I would usually have to invest in 30 minutes of hard play at the park first. We'd done lots of really good heavy work and movement. And then when we got to the shop, I'd shove an apple in his hand because I knew that would give him the crunchy. And by the time that apple was gone, I needed to be out of the shop.
Yeah, literally.
So there's also these other strategies that have to kind of wrap around these kids that are more dysregulated. And it just the one tool often doesn't work on its own. Sometimes you have to have 2 or 3 layered in, and be mindful and intentional about what they are and how you're using them for it to be really effective.
And what you just described is like, as you said, a primer. It's like a co-regulation. So you're co-regulating them before you know what's going to dysregulate them. So wild.
Correct.
They're just all so unique and individual, and what works for one won't work for the other, right? Just as us as adult human beings. So
so it's pretty exciting. Anyway, there's a lot of amazing work to be done.
There is always. And you are paving the way for a lot of families to become empowered. So kudos to you, Suzie. Big round of applause. Question I want to ask you before we go, Suzie, is if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it would definitely be you are enough. Believe in yourself, believe in your gut. Your gut is actually good. You actually know where you're going. So, just calmly, quietly get on with it, because the amount of time I've spent over my life second guessing myself, it's just wasted energy, I realize that now, but it was a lot of anxiety. It created a lot of anxiety. So for me, so that would be my advice to myself.
Beautiful. I have a question.
You've got it, Mama.
Amen, sis. Go get your dreams. That leads into my question is, if there is someone listening who is putting off their dreams, what advice would you give them?
Well, don't put it off, because it's you know, we only have today, really, you know, and you don't know what's going to come tomorrow or down the track. And, you know, it's life can change really quickly on a 12. So, you know, make the most of what you can now, and, you know, reach out for support if you need support to get going on something. Sometimes we have to jump and trust that the net will come. And that's kind of scary, but sometimes we need someone to hold our hand and jump with us.
Like a coach or a mentor or something similar.
Totally. And that allows us to have that transformation and that change that we know at our core is truly us. Yeah. Because I think sometimes we fight that. And certainly as women, we're taught that. We're taught fit this mold when we're little, you know, fit this mold. And I think that's changing over time.
We break the glass ceilings now. We don't fix them all. Like, we don't fit in the mold. We're breaking glass ceilings.
We're working towards it, but I don't think it's still accepted socially worldwide. So
we're here to make the change.
Still massive issues in play. And I think, you know, women in general are taught that more. Stay quiet, you know, just get on with the work, like just do the work quietly in the background. Don't say, use your voice to push back. But I think that's slowly changing, which is really exciting. I think, like, for my daughter and her generation and your kids, you know, I look at that and I think, wow, these girls are going to be able to get up and really
Amen.
They sure are. And we are all about using our voice here at EWP.
So much.
And let's pave the way for our kids. You know, let's pave that way so that it's easier when they come through, and it's not kind of like a little narrow track. We've got the track actually happening so they can make their way through and get to the top of the mountain fairly easily and smash that glass ceiling, as you say,
Literally. Let's go.
You're so knowledgeable, Suzie, and we just can't express our gratitude deep enough for your willingness to re-record and to come on EWP podcast. We will make sure we drop your socials and the free ebook for all of our listeners.
Okay. Thank you so much, beautiful.
Fantastic.
Thank you for listening in to EWP. Have a wonderful day. We hope you feel inspired to take back your power. Thank you for listening into the EWP Potty with Jules and Day. We want to challenge you to share this potty with someone you love. Let's get all women involved. Follow us on Insta at empoweringwomen_project. Facebook and TikTok at Empowering Women Project.
We invite you to interact with us on our socials, our threads, and in our DMs. We are open to collaborating and invite you to reach out if you feel inspired to be a guest on our EWP podcast. Remember, you are the creator of your reality. We encourage you to start believing in yourself and the magic of the universe.